Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome you to Deepbridge's latest webinar. My name is Andrew Aldridge, and I'm a partner and head of life and marketing at Deepbridge Capital. The theme today is Meet the Deepbridge investment team, and I'm delighted that we're joined by investment managers from both the technology and life sciences teams here at Deepbridge. At Deepbridge, we provide investment opportunities into a portfolio of actively managed, growth-focused companies within the technology and life sciences sectors, allowing investors to take advantage of the potential tax benefits available under the Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Seed Enterprise Investment Scheme. Our ethos is to actively support, mentor and invest alongside energetic, exceptional management teams with the aim of helping these businesses achieve their full potential and thereby provide our investors with the best possible outcomes. Before we properly kick things off, it's important to remind viewers that anything discussed in this webinar should not be construed as financial advice. Investments made are in unquoted and illiquid companies and therefore carry a high degree of risk. Capital invested will be at risk and investors could lose all of their investment. Investors should not invest if capital is required in the near term. Now that I've got that important bit of information out of the way, I'm delighted to welcome our guests today. I'm delighted to introduce to you Katy Levitt, investment manager in our technology team, and Ben Carter, investment manager in our life sciences team. So Ben, if I may start with you. Thank you for joining us, first of all.
No problem.
You're investment manager within the life sciences team. Can you just briefly give us an introduction to your background and kind of ultimately what led you to joining Deepbridge back in 2018?
Yeah, well, morning, and thanks for the invite. So going back longer than I care to remember, I graduated around 20 years ago now. And following university, I joined a large US company on their graduate recruitment scheme. Mm-hmm. Chose that particular role. It was really exciting because one of the things that they promised was that they would parachute you into different departments to find where which aligned with your skill set.
Good learning curve there.
Yeah, absolutely, which aligned with your skill set and also which department you had a passion for as well. So found myself after a number of years within the healthcare department. Had 5 really successful and happy years there. Was headhunted by one of our partner organisations at the time to go and work within their hospital sector.
Okay.
Both of those companies were very mature, so gave me fantastic experience because I got to work with a high proportion of the UK hospitals, with the NHS directly. So really, really good times and great experience. Moving forward, following on from that, I decided to join a startup because I've been working within such large organisations. Mm-hmm. Thought it'd be really interesting to see what that entailed, and spent the next 10 years working within startups and scale-ups. One of those companies was a digital health company, and I joined as commercial director. Mm-hmm. And actually our head of life science at Deepbridge, Savas, he was actually the CEO at the time.
Right.
So worked with Savas for a period of time, really fun, hard work. We were forming the value proposition, we were commercialising the company, looking to raise investment funds. Savas actually left to join Deepbridge and mm-hmm. set up the life science department. I spent a number of other years still working within digital health. But Savas and I kept in real close contact, and I think in 2018, as you say, he picked up the phone and said we had a number of companies in the portfolio and it would be a good time for me to join. Explained the role, and really exciting, and decided to join. And
you're a glutton of punishment, and you wanted to have more of Savas. Great.
It's a great thing.
and Katy, can you just give a bit of introduction about your background and since joining Deepbridge in 2019, kind of why Deepbridge, I guess?
Yeah, certainly. So essentially, my degree was in languages, and following that, I spent a bit of time working and living in Europe and in Asia. And actually, while I was in Asia, I got approached by an early stage company asking for me to do some translation and some marketing for them. And through that, got into a network of kind of early stage startup companies. Mm-hmm. And really enjoyed that work and decided, I'd like working with the early stage and how dynamic they are. And when I returned to the UK, within a couple of weeks, I actually got introduced to the head of private markets at an equity investment platform in Cambridge. So I initially joined there as an investment associate, and then moved up to be the senior analyst and build a team there. And after a number of years there and great experience, I reached out to Deepbridge. I think what attracted me to Deepbridge was the kind of experience and the expertise of the founding team and of all of the partners.
Yeah.
And it was a place, there was real 3 distinct areas of investment, all of which are kind of, very hot topics of investment in the UK, and Deepbridge had kind of that real place in the market, and that approach of being hands-on with their investments, which I really liked that approach. So I reached out, and
great.
A year later I'm here.
And I guess that appeal of hands-on, because both of you have come from working with startups. It's you've not come from a traditional fund manager background, which I think is something which we pride ourselves on at Deepbridge, and it's probably appealing, and your skill sets are attuned to that.
I think it's probably the single biggest reason that I looked at the opportunity within Deepbridge and thought I could add value.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Kind of just looking at your sectors, so Katy in the tech world and Ben in life sciences, what do you think, why do you think your specific sectors are potentially appealing from an investment perspective? Katy, for yourself, the disruptive tech world.
Well, I think nowadays technology is embedded in every part of life, the way we live, the way we work, the way we socialise. And every company, no matter what stage and how old they are, if they're not using the latest technology, then they're no longer competitive. So investing in the kind of innovation that's happening now, which will be the tech of the future, is very enticing. And I think the uptake of technology, particularly in the UK, is so vast that it's a great space, and obviously of a lot of interest for investors.
And Ben, kind of life sciences sector, I guess in some ways there's some parallels with the tech world, but also some very distinct differences, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly some parallels. Myself and Katy sit in the same office. We see lots of opportunities, and on occasion we're discussing across the table to see which particular portfolio that particular company
most appropriate
for. I think certainly within life science, it's a very broad area. There's a lot of subsectors within life science. Some of them that are, from my perspective, more interesting than others, and that's why we have quite a broad team within Deepbridge with different skill sets, so we can look at different opportunities and find the appropriate person. Looking at some of the figures, so life science, for instance, makes up around 20% of US GDP.
Right.
Probably more like 10% of the UK GDP. And I think, if you turn on the news, if you are, reading any papers, you're reading stories or hearing stories about a healthcare ecosystem that is creaking at the seams, and something that, requires technology to bring new efficiencies. So it's an industry that's ripe for disruption.
Yep.
And also we hear the term quite often, impact investing, and, I might be biased, but certainly within life science, I don't think there's, a better sector to invest in if you want to make a real impact and look at real global issues.
I guess making people's lives better and ultimately saving lives, I guess, as well. So what do you, as part of the investment process and when companies come to you, what do you look for in investee companies? And Ben, we'll start with you, kind of what are the key things you look for?
So Deepbridge has a strict criteria that we look at. There's a number of things that I guess from my perspective, I think are more important than others. So first and foremost, I guess we always look at the founder or the managing team, because the people within a business are incredibly important. So you want people with the relevant experience or the relevant enthusiasm. I won't take up all of the criteria because I'm sure Katy will want to pitch on a few as well. But I guess within life science, one of the things that we are constantly looking for is a company that is able to create barriers to entry, whether that's through know-how or whether that's through intellectual property, through patents.
And Katy, have you got kind of other things that you look for? Is there any difference between tech and life sciences at all?
I think the kind of overarching criteria are very similar in terms of the IP being there, the kind of global scalability, and also that kind of disruptive tech that is applicable to multiple markets is very enticing for us, and I echo what Ben's saying about the team as well. So those are the main kind of criteria that we need to see for all of the companies.
And is there a difference between SEIS and EIS? Because obviously SEIS, you're going in much earlier generally, but is there kind of a difference, Ben, between the two types of companies?
I guess when we look at them, a number of the SEIS opportunities are of course, very early stage. Myself and Savas call them kind of vapor stage companies. So often they have an idea, but perhaps they don't even have the minimum viable product when they approach us. And part of the funding round is to actually create that and onboard their first users. So, we are always looking for, looking at the team across both portfolios. I guess when you come to EIS investment, you want to see patents in place, or certainly very close to
traction,
that.
I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. You want to see that they've progressed through the regulatory environment. That's often the case within technology and life science. And really, you want to see them be at the start of the commercialization stage, which is the most important aspect of the business.
Sure. So kind of you've both talked about the importance of the people and the founders, the entrepreneurs, if you like. What makes a good entrepreneur in your experience? I know it's probably how long's a piece of string, but Katy, kind of what do you key features or?
I think nowadays anyone and everyone can try to be an entrepreneur and try to start their own business. I think that the good ones have that entrepreneurial spirit, which is hard to define, but it's essentially someone that is adaptable and flexible, because things never go to plan. And also someone that's very persevering, and works well in a team as well is critical for an entrepreneur. Not just a one-man band, but to create a company, the culture is a big part of that.
Great. Ben, any thoughts?
Yeah, Katy summed up really, really well in terms of some of the things that we look for. I think, adding to that, perhaps individuals or teams that have experience and have been there before.
Yep.
So we look for people that perhaps have had exits prior to this particular opportunity. So they have the experience, they've been able to create a plan previously and been able to navigate across that plan and execute in a way that's led to a successful business. But that said, I guess what you don't always look for is because you can't not invest in people if they don't necessarily have the experience as well, because there's great young entrepreneurs out there. And if you look at some of the most successful tech companies in the world, your Facebooks, your Amazons, it's quite often that the individual that was their first foray into business. And so there's great case studies out there that suggest people with the right enthusiasm and the right skill set are able to do that even without that experience.
I think one of the great examples was one of our previous webinars. We had Samir from Zillico in the seat where you are, and one of the things I think we loved about Zillico was that they had two academic founders, but they identified they needed the commercial expertise and got Samir in early, which some of the proven track record. And
I think you certainly need that, and Katy touched on it in that that individual has to be personable and they have to be able to build a team around them. They have to realise what their strengths are. They have to realise where their weaknesses are, and bring in the appropriate skill sets around them.
Yeah. I
think if I could sum up an entrepreneur in one kind of word, it's probably resilient. Because as Katy said, things never always go to plan in early stage companies.
I guess they never get money as quickly as they want either in terms of income and things like that. So,
absolutely not.
We talked about entrepreneurs and founders and startups. I think we're seeing, I think you touched on it, you're seeing entrepreneurs more as a career, more people are seeing that as a career option, and certainly I'm speaking to people, youngsters these days who see that as their career. They don't want to work for a big organisation. And you're seeing universities now starting to advertise careers or courses in how to be an entrepreneur. Is that a bit of an oxymoron? Can you teach some of those skills, or is it an innate personal thing? Katy?
I personally think that it's difficult to teach, but it's always good to encourage, and it's great that entrepreneurs or those that have that kind of desire to be an entrepreneur and that, as I say, entrepreneurial spirit now has a lot more support available and coaching to guide them and steer them in the right direction, which I think is great, but probably not for everyone.
No. Fair enough.
I certainly don't like the idea of universities trying to create the entrepreneurs of the future. I think things like leadership can be trained. I think all of not all, but a majority of the skills that you need as an entrepreneur can be finessed and worked upon. But I guess that resilience, that innate ability to drive something forward, it is not always trainable.
So kind of nature versus nurture.
Absolutely.
So at Deepbridge, kind of just going back to deals and what we look for and how we get those deals, etc. We're one of the few EIS managers, if not the only EIS manager, that aims to fully deploy investors' money on a monthly basis. And I know when we talk about internally, it's largely because of our contacts. We've got a great deal flow, etc. And we've got companies coming through all the time. Where do we kind of source those companies from, or where do you get those introductions to potential investee companies? Ben, is that seeing in the life sciences world that's key?
I mean, just to kind of put a figure on it, last year within life science, we probably saw over 1,000 opportunities and funded less than 30. So deal flow is readily available. The deals come to us in a number of in a variety of different ways. So we have great links with the commercialization departments of UK universities. To kind of prove that point, I guess in recent years we've done spin-outs from Manchester University, from Leeds, from Cambridge, from UCL, from Aberdeen, to name just a few. With incubators, great relationship with the Welsh Development Agency,
Scottish Enterprise,
absolutely, and also there's probably no better introduction to Deepbridge than a warm lead. So if somebody simply is looking for funding, logs onto the website, sends us a 2-pager or the business deck, we probably don't look at that as in detail as we would if somebody that we know, we trust, we've worked with previously introduced us. So the network of the investment managers and the wider Deepbridge team is incredibly important.
Katy, is there anything kind of other than that we any sources of deal flow that are important to mention or to get across?
No, I think pretty much that kind of network that we have is really quite broad.
And is it across the UK? Is it just the UK?
So we actually see quite a bit of deal flow coming from Australia.
Okay.
So we essentially we've got links with the Queensland government, and we have kind of a consultant that works and to introduce companies to us that either have a UK presence already or are looking to set up in the UK. Okay. And we've now invested in 4 companies with the head office in Australia, but that are supporting quite a large operation or part of the operations of the business in the UK. And some of those companies, the technology coming out of Australia is really interesting. So I think we will see probably more of that happening over this coming year.
So we're not just limited to our shores of the UK.
No.
It's okay.
We're not, and I think that's incredibly important and really interesting. I mean, certainly tech have kind of a wider network overseas than in life science, but quite often that they pass companies through to the life science department. And one that came over from Queensland was actually a drug discovery company, looking at helping people that had a stroke, and actually part of that was through the venom that was found in spiders in Australia. So we would not have found that that
so it
couldn't have been a UK company or an American company or anywhere else globally. So there's some really exciting opportunities from overseas.
So I guess kind of as part of that, obviously the enterprise investment scheme by its very nature over the last few years has shifted very much towards growth-focused companies, particularly tech and life sciences companies. Does that mean we're seeing competition for deal flow, or just because of our contacts and overseas things, does that mean there's not really an impact on us, Katy? Is that something you're seeing?
I mean, there are obviously more and more investment providers out there, and particularly in the kind of SEIS and EIS space. And there's a number that we've co-invested with for a few deals. I think, again, the kind of expertise of the investment directors that we have in our network is essentially what people approach us for. So in terms of, in day-to-day, I don't think I really see that much in terms of direct competition. It's either kind of working in parallel, or people are specifically wanting to come to us for
it's quite a cohesive kind of ecosystem.
Yes, exactly,
And at Deepbridge, we often talk about our hands-on management companies, and I think that's what investors and advisors find very reassuring, is that we're quite transparent about the companies we're investing in and what we do, and kind of making sure that they've got the best opportunities. What does that kind of hands-on management actually really look like? Have you got any examples of how we work with companies? Or
yeah, I mean, if you want me to take that one. So each and every entrepreneur is different. Each and every founding team, is fundamentally different, and their skill sets are different. So when we're looking at the companies within our portfolio, what they require from Deepbridge is vastly different. I think we are an active investor, so we always take a position on the board, which I think is important, for information rights, etc. But where we've helped, so human capital's always a real issue in early stage companies. So if you've got a young founder perhaps that needs to surround themselves with people that have been there and done that, and often we're able to make introductions because, as you can imagine, our network is wide, expansive, and we know the right people and trust the right people to drive those businesses forward. On a more kind of practical level, I'll give you one example. We funded a business that was in essence a spin out from Liverpool University. It was a young female entrepreneur, a design student, and she'd created a great product around hydration management. But of course, whenever she was going out to speak to care homes, the NHS, hospitals where they could offer that, early adopter provision, then she didn't have those contacts. So the wider Deepbridge team was able to introduce her to every single vertical that her product could sell into, and she's flying now.
So that initial kind of commercial traction wouldn't have been achievable without that kind of introduction, I guess.
I mean, you could probably,
or it made it take.
It would have taken longer because I certainly would have backed that particular entrepreneur to be resilient and find those early adopters. But it certainly gave her a springboard and accelerated the path.
Katy, in the tech world, are there kind of any examples of, or kind of examples of how hands-on management actually works, or what we mean?
Yes, so we've, again, in the tech side, we are very active, taking seats on the boards of the companies, and providing that kind of hands-on advice and guidance. For a few companies, we've been able to help them set up in other geographies outside of the UK, particularly in the US, which has opened up, a huge market, which is obviously quite daunting for startups to do by themselves. And we've even had investment director on the board of a company who have helped make actual kind of technical improvements which have improved the kind of efficiency of and the cost saving with that for a company. And so there's a multitude of ways that we can help in terms of introducing them to the right people, and helping them essentially commercialize their ideas.
And I guess you've got that proactive relationship. You can see if there are challenges, you can see them coming. It's not a last minute thing, and you can actually help the company kind of prevent that and work around them all.
Absolutely. One of the things that we like is information from the companies, I guess, little and often. Within life science, we're kind of the 3Ps approach, where we're looking at progress, we're looking at problems, and we're looking at a plan how to overcome those problems. And when we see that and we're having those conversations or receiving the information, then we're able to pick up the phone and walk them through that if we have the experience.
So I guess what are the kind of common challenges growth focused businesses face, Katy? Are there kind of things which you can almost predict that companies will face as a challenge as they grow?
It's usually around kind of resources. So whether that be having the right team in place or hiring in the right team members that are required, whether that's funding to the right level, had the kind of budget been well thought through, and I
echo your points there, Katy. I think whenever somebody's at the very early stage and they're looking to they're going through the funding path and they're trying to commercialize their product, quite often there is an element of naivety in that they think it will happen sooner than it actually will, and so it'll quite often take twice as long to develop the product and twice as long to get that first first customer.
So there's an element of realism, I guess, kind of, everyone's got great ideas and enthusiastic, but just making sure there's the realism and the practical kind of approach to it.
Yeah, and it's also in a kind of similar vein is you can see problems arise in kind of the commercialization path if there's not been quite sufficient research and development done and making sure that there's that kind of product market fit. So it's all well and good having some really snazzy bit of tech, but if there's no one out there that's going to really buy that tech, and have you developed it with your target market in mind? So that
there's a huge focus on kind of trying to crack your first customer, and they think once they've done, they've absolutely knocked it out of the park. That's the solution, but in essence, what they need to ensure they've done is created that sales methodology, a recurring revenue stream, and
it's repeatable.
It's a repeatable business model.
Yeah, no, great. In terms of in the life sciences sector, Ben, for you particularly, in January 2019, the government launched their long-term plan for the NHS. I guess that's music to your ears, is it?
It certainly is music to my ears. I think with any document that is published, you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But I think the beauty of that particular plan is that everything contained within that plan is already happening somewhere within the UK. So we talk about digital transformation, etc. So it isn't just a dream document, and the core part of that is to ensure that the technologies and efficiencies that are being created by these products and services is rolled out across the whole of the NHS rather than just in one particular CCG, for instance.
I guess your point earlier that investing in life sciences is kind of almost the ultimate impact investment. Is that is certainly in the UK is looking at transforming and helping the NHS grow and scale as an organisation.
It certainly is, and I think one of the things that's part of that plan as well is about joining up services. So quite often different elements of the UK. So for instance, local authorities in the social care sector pick up some of the pains that often people outside of the industry think would sit within the NHS. But as there's that joined up thinking, it enables those efficiencies to be across the board.
And I guess kind of leading on to that, sorry Katy, we're kind of life sciences focused just for a minute, but in terms of the kind of made in Britain kind of stamp in terms of life sciences, etc., in terms of when we're taking products to the global market, is that well received around the world? Is that kind of recognised as being a mark of quality?
I guess if you speak to a UK company, they'll certainly tell you that. I think an analogy with car manufacturers. So if you want an executive family car, does it have to be German? And if you wanted a sports car for the weekend, does it have to be Italian? I think we have to accept that there's great technology, great products and services created throughout the globe. And yes, being created in Britain does have that, but probably flip it slightly in that sold in Britain might actually be the better rubber stamp. So if you've created a product and you've sold it, because ultimately if I'm a UK company and I go and try and sell my product or service to the US or to Australia, one of the first things that they're going to ask me is how are you doing in your home market,
right? And
and what that question is really saying is have you sold to the NHS yet? And once you have that really is seen as a big rubber stamping exercise.
And Katy, in the tech world, is kind of how is British innovation, I guess, perceived around the world, or do British companies have any kind of advantage when selling globally at all?
I think the UK is known. Barclays released a report on the kind of tech and venture capital sphere, and highlighted that the UK is or has the kind of largest concentration of capital in Europe, and it's turning heads in the US as well. So I think we are known in the UK for producing good tech, and obviously we've got some top universities which help with creating the kind of initial IP, and I think with that as well, and with the kind of amount of investment and the EIS that's in the UK, which I don't think there's quite a similar kind of scheme elsewhere, and we because of that we do see that there is that investment there, and investment does drive innovation.
So UK is very much seen as a place to kind of start and scale up a business, I guess it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, touching on Katy's point around the universities, we've got access to a fantastic talent pool here. You look at the statistics, spin-outs from Cambridge University are the most successful spin-outs anywhere globally, overachieving, the likes of your Harvards, your MITs of this world. There's incredible opportunities to invest in, in UK companies.
I think Forbes said last year there was something like 13 unicorns in the UK now. Are investors kind of almost obsessed with this kind of £1 billion mark on a valuation of a company? Should they be looking at and considering actually not everyone's going to get there, but actually you want realistic returns? Is there kind of an obsession with unicorns in the market? Either of you, Ben, kind of your point?
Yeah, I mean, unicorns, they're mythical creatures and, not often seen. So, but you can't step away from it. There is, of course, there's noise, and, I'm sure, both Deepbridge and our investors absolutely want to see some of those companies, set on that path to hopefully, achieving that. But that being said, we do invest in early stage companies. Yep. However, we do look at the addressable market, and it has to be a large global addressable market. So I would say all of the companies that we invest in have opportunities should they progress and hit their plan correctly.
Yeah, Katy, have you got anything in terms of what do you expect to see in terms of kind of that kind of ecosystem?
Well, just statistics wise, when you look at the number of companies that are founded versus the number that hit the kind of 3-year mark, let alone go on to become unicorns. Really, as a kind of an active investor in early stage companies, yes, you've got the hope of one of them, maybe in kind of your whole investing career or maybe more, to go on to become a unicorn. But actually, predominantly, we're probably going to see more of those kind of middle ground returns on investment, which are just as important, and they can still go on to do to become really successful in their own right.
And I guess from that kind of exit perspective, are exits you expecting within our portfolios in the tech? We're starting to see exits now coming through from our tech fund. Life Sciences EIS is coming around for coming up to 3 years, so I guess over the next few years we'll start to see exits coming through there. Are they likely to be trade sales swallowed by bigger beasts? Are they IPOs? Kind of what's your take on what exits might look like in an EIS portfolio?
You touched on the point around the life science portfolio was set in 2016, so 3 to 4 years in now. I think anything with healthcare, life science in the title tends to take that little bit longer to realise the plan and achieve that kind of exit point. And we want to ensure that once the company is moving towards exit, it's at the right inflection point. So that's where we work with the team in our corporate finance department, work with our investee companies to ensure that they're maximising the value of the company. Certainly within life science, the majority of if I look at exits that over the last 2 to 3 years, the majority of those exits sit within trade sales. Right. That being said, IPOs is almost certainly another route as well.
Almost kind of a backstop and another option, I guess.
Indeed.
Is that similar in the tech world? Is that kind of a trend you'd expect to see?
Yes, I think that there's probably more of kind of a even split almost between IPOs and trade sales. Yeah. And sometimes you'd see if a company starts writing an IPO paper, then suddenly they attract potential acquirers. So it's always, I can see with a number of the companies in the tech portfolio how particularly at certain points in the not too distant future, particularly when you get to the point of going to market, that competitors would instead of trying to quickly develop something to compare, just acquire them as well. But IPOs are certainly another avenue that our companies could explore.
One of the questions that I often get asked when I'm out seeing advisors and investors, etc., is, go on, which one's the next one to exit? What's the next one what's working on? And I guess it's kind of sometimes, particularly if it's a competitor coming in to buy, it might be quite a short-term process. It's not that you're planning for months and years for that particular exit. Is that true? Is that kind of my make-believe?
Things can happen. Certainly things can happen quickly. I think within life science, certainly we tend to find that organisations that are the natural acquirer tends to perhaps perform scientific due diligence in different ways. So that could be that at the very early stages, one of our portfolio companies might have a partnership or a licensing agreement with, a very large pharmaceutical company. And part of that process, we always talk about it and say there's no better way, of finding out what's within a company than working within that company.
Yeah.
And I think that sits very, very true with the kind of M&A departments within, large pharma.
Yeah, very good. We've got a question in from one of our viewers, so thank you for that. Looking at kind of, I guess, working back from the exit kind of world is actually at the outset when we're looking at a company, how do we value an investment or an investee company? It's I guess from the outside world, it's kind of it's magic. It's how does that actually work? Katy, what's the kind of process, or how do we approach that?
So the approach we typically take is to look at the kind of potential valuation of a company in, say, 3 to 5 years' time. The kind of financial forecast of the company, what are the key value drivers, what are the key kind of assumptions behind the forecasts for 3 to 5 years, and then work back on the basis of what the types of returns that we would want to see, and that's kind of the starting point for the valuation negotiations, really.
Is that similar in life sciences?
It certainly is. I think
Yeah.
Katy absolutely really eloquently described the science behind valuation. I think it's probably an art form as well. So there has to be a willing buyer and a willing seller. So and there's always a negotiation at the very start. And as we mentioned, we've seen thousands and thousands of business plans, and one of the things that every single entrepreneur to a individual, they're quite bullish with their forecasts at the very early stage of their business.
Back to your point about realism, I guess.
Exactly. So that's where quite often when we're looking at an opportunity, we'll look at the team and we'll look at the problem that they're trying to solve. It's not really until you have them across the table and see the whites of their eyes that you can actually really understand, whether those assumptions that they're taking and whether those, revenue projections are indeed realistic.
And is that kind of where our supervisory investment committee, who are specialists in their field, when they review our kind of investments, is that kind of where they really come into play? Is that, Katy, is that kind of a useful mechanism?
Yeah, certainly both the supervisory investment committee, which again, their kind of experience in industry is really helpful in terms of picking out things that are problems that maybe we hadn't even thought of before, but then it's something we take forward and bear in mind with every other review that we do. But even the internal investment committees as well, again, that kind of the investment directors that we have on board also have that experience. So they're really key in the negotiation.
And I guess I opened today with the risk warning. These are high risk investments. They're in illiquid, unquoted companies, etc. What is the kind of theme, or are the main things why companies fail at early stages, Ben, in the life sciences sector? Are there any kind of key?
That's obviously something that we look at all the time, actually, and it's something that's really key to our decision-making process. So, statistically, there's a number of reasons why early-stage companies fail. The biggest factor often is somebody building something that nobody wants.
Right.
So when we're actually looking at an opportunity, one of the most important things that we look at is, what does their user panel look like? We're hoping that it's not just the founding or management team kind of sat in a room thinking, do you know what, if we create this, if we build it, they will come. Yeah. In essence, they have to have created a user panel, and it's that user panel that's going to drive the innovation forward. And also the people central to all businesses. So outside of building something nobody wants, one of the other major reasons is that there's quite often falling out between founding teams. So across the table, you're looking at how they work together, the interactions between them, and ensuring that it is a balanced team, but certainly a team that can smoothly transition through the stages.
So is that sometimes where we fit in almost as the kind of the referee and the kind of intermediary, just to make sure everybody's kind of getting on? Is that a kind of a core job of our management? Sometimes
it can feel like that at board meetings, absolutely. But around the table, you've got some really sensible people around a board table, and it's important that the founder listens to each and every person around that table, and if they're not willing to do that, then perhaps they're not the right founder for the business.
Sure. And Katy, anything kind of to add, any kind of red flags or anything that might be a commonality in terms of companies failing?
I think Ben's kind of summed up the two key elements, and again the other main one being funding, and requiring, having a well thought out budget and being able to. The thing also when companies are in that kind of growth stage, so more for the EIS side of things, momentum starts picking up quite quickly. For a number of companies, when they get to a certain kind of pivotal point, things really start to speed up. And if they don't have the capital and the resources behind that, even if you do have the product market fit, and even if you have a good team in place, if you don't have the capital there and the resources there to fulfill, the sales, then that's another reason.
And I guess to take advantage of opportunities and things, you need that kind of funding base there.
Yeah.
So if you were sat here in front of an audience of entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs, kind of what would be your one or two top tips for them? Katy, what would your advice to them be?
Always plan enough time ahead of starting an investment round. Even if you're approaching providers that you've worked with before, the process, we always want to do a good amount of due diligence, as does, all investment providers of all sizes, really. So it does take time, and probably longer than you initially think. The other is to really kind of, part of the due diligence process is also, again, it's about the team and whether we are a good fit for them as well, because taking that kind of hands-on approach to investing, we do become part of the team. So you need to ensure that you be able to work well together. So I think for all entrepreneurs, when you're getting investors on board, they're there for the long haul. And it's whether you can.
There's got to be that personality fit. Ben, any kind of advice you'd offer?
Looking at the UK, certainly there's a number of investor readiness programs that are kind of readily available to entrepreneurs. I think, certainly take advantage of those prior to sitting in front of an investor. Katy mentioned that it's important to understand who your investor is. So, if somebody's, sat across the table from us, pitching an idea in essence, all they're really looking for is the capital that we can provide, then we're not the right investor for that particular individual. So make sure that, the investor's skill set are aligned.
I guess that's a two-way thing as well. I guess there's companies that we've probably looked at where we go, do you know what, great idea, but actually, can we work with that team? Is that a scenario?
Yeah, we've got broad teams in both life science and in technology, and and we see some wonderful companies. But actually, when we sit down with the internal investment committee or just within our own teams, if we don't feel we can add real value, then unfortunately we pass on those opportunities.
So we're nearly up in terms of time. Just kind of a couple of relatively open questions for you. In terms of the technology sector, kind of what's exciting you in the market at the moment? Kind of, are there any trends or anything that you're seeing, or anything that you think is okay? Next couple of years, this is kind of big, exciting stuff we're looking at.
I think the kind of artificial intelligence, and the kind of robotics and machines being able to take over from some of the kind of human work-based approaches. I think that's kind of, it's exciting what we're seeing happen at the moment, and I think there's still kind of a long way to go as well in what's possible with that, and that's certainly a hot topic at the moment. I think also it's just the kind of transparency that nowadays people are wanting, and that kind of control over data. That's another place where, with the kind of opportunities of things like blockchain or a distributed ledger, or things where you've really got that kind of traceability and security. So I think it is really exciting what technology is able to do now and how it can enhance. And it's always interesting to see the things that people take now as being kind of something that they need to have, which 5-10 years ago was actually considered a luxury, and the things that now are coming into play that seem really new and exciting and luxurious actually are the things that will depend on in 5-10 years time.
And Ben, in the life sciences sector, any kind of exciting things that you're passionate about?
Absolutely. And I think there's lots of subsectors within life science, and so if one of my colleagues was sat here, they might give you a different answer than I would. But I think the advent of precision medicine is certainly an area that we're all interested in. Digital health, bringing unseen efficiencies to the marketplace, and those kind of digital health products and kind of the overlap of tech and life science. It's no surprise that when you look at the media and see the likes of Fitbit's acquisition or Amazon creating their healthcare departments. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out over the coming years. I think from a personal level as well, it's really interesting to see how, as our portfolio matures, what the companies we've already invested in can achieve moving forward and solving those big issues.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I think one of the overriding things, certainly for me, is your passion for what you do. I think that comes across in abundance. I think one of the things when we talk to investors and advisors is very much about our transparency. We want people to hear from you guys, understand that, and also meet some of our companies, etc. So we regularly do events and things and webinars with our companies. So I think certainly from my perspective, this is fantastic for our guys to actually to kind of see you guys and hear from what you do and how we do it. So thank you very much to everyone who's joined us today. We do have a number of Meet the Companies events going on around the country at the moment. You can register to attend those events via deepbridgecapital.com. Those events generally have 2 of our invested companies in an event for you to come along, get a flavour for what you're investing in and the types of thing that Deepbridge does. So thank you very much for your time today and have a great day. Thank you.